So let me introduce you. First of all, my show is called the Area 67 Music Podcast Show. I'm Mikey Vegas, and today we're with Joel Wanasek.
People have been screwing up my middle name, last name since I've been like 5 years old, so I'm used to it.
Cool. I sat here and practiced it, and I even listened to a couple of people announcing, and I messed it up. I should have been looking at my notes and just read it. It would have been easier.
I'm definitely over it. I should just have a stage name, and it'd be much easier. But you know what I mean. It's at this point, it's impossible to go back. So,
right.
What can you do?
Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show and being on my podcast. It's an honor to have you on the show. So,
well, likewise.
I appreciate it very much.
Always enjoy doing this type of thing.
I see that you've done a lot of stuff over the past 8 years or 7 years since I saw you, or 8 years since I saw you over at Dan's and at Soundmind in the Poconos. Dan's grown a lot also. I don't know if you've seen his studio over the past couple of years.
It looks incredible. He was just telling me about some projects he was working on with Andy Wallace and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to fanboy out for a second.
Yeah.
Dude, that's sick.
I wanted to call over there when Andy was there and just kind of like, can I talk to Andy real quick? But no, I had to keep my distance and just fanboy from a distance and just kind of see what was going on. But it's cool to see his growth and finally starting to get some recognition. He's been doing it so long, and he's such a great mix engineer. I think he really deserves some recognition.
Oh, he's fantastic. He's been on our podcast. I think we brought him on a few years ago, maybe like 4 years ago. It's been so long since we started doing URM. I think we just crossed 5 years. So wow. For me, it's like a blur. Sometimes I'm like, wow, was that 4 years ago? That feels like last week. It's
right.
Just intense.
So, I mean, you've been doing a lot. I know that you teamed up with Joey Sturgis. And can you tell me a little bit how that came about?
Sure. Well, let me bring you back to like 2008.
Okay.
So,
all right.
It was interesting. Kind of an interesting story because Joey was like the first producer I had ever worked with, and I was the first producer that he had ever worked with, if that made sense. So we were both self-taught dudes from, I'm a cornfield in Wisconsin, and he was from like a trailer park in what state is that? Indiana. And so we're from like small towns. Not a lot of people, obviously no recording and stuff. And obviously we've, done decently since then and, done some cool stuff. But so I remember I had this band in, they were like a local band. And I think this is actually a good point, is that the band came in for like 2 days. I was like, man, these guys do not have it together. They were just not good. Again, you smile, you do the best work you can for the client, because at the end of the day, you got to put your name on it. I know some engineers are really against the idea of polishing a turd, and I just think it's not smart as a business person, because in my opinion, the better you can make a terrible band look, there are no terrible bands, but seriously, the better you can make a terrible band look, the more people that are going to recognize that, because everybody knows that band in the market, they're not, they don't want to like trap, but everybody knows. And then when you make them sound sick, people are like, whoa, we got to come work with that guy. Right. So I kind of did one of those scenarios. And like a week later, I got a call from this dude at the kid's high school. So that band had already broken up. They're like, dude, I heard this band that you did, and they were awesome. Like, can we come in and do a single? We've been recording with this guy down the street, and, he had like one of the premier studios in the town, and I was just getting started. But they were paying him like $60 an hour. I was charging like 22. And they thought my work just kicked his ass. So I was like, all right, cool. And I'm a competitive type person. And so I wanted to flatten them. So the band came in, we did our thing together. It was great. And they were like, hey, this was awesome. We really like working with you. We're going to go record with this Joey guy. He did this Devil Wears Prada band, and they're starting to blow up, and he's kind of like becoming famous. So we booked time. We can only afford 4 days. So how about you do the record and we'll just have him mix it? I'm like, all right, cool, man. I never worked with somebody else. So I hit him up. I'm like, hey, dude, you mind if I come down? I've never like worked with another engineer before. And we just kind of started talking over email about like he used Cubase and I used Cubase, and we were both self-taught. And it was really sick. So like I got in the van and we drove down to Indiana, and this is like a 5 or 6 hour drive from where I live. So we hung out, and Joey and I just were like best buddies right away. We would nerd out till like 4:30 in the morning just talking shop. And it was crazy because, again, neither of us had ever worked with another engineer. Like we always wanted internships and stuff, but it just never worked out. And we were both just kind of self-taught. Right. So we kind of just became friends, and I did some like ghost mix stuff, worked with him and some of his overflow. Cause I mean, he was just exploding at that time. That was like when stuff really started taking off for him. So, I was helping him. He was sending me some overflow with some bands that he's like, I don't have time for this band, but I'm 6 projects behind. So you want to help me out on this? I'm like, yeah. So, I would just help him where I could. And it was nice cause I needed the money at the time. And we kind of, we hung out and talked a little while and for a few years, and then he kind of just did his thing and just exploded, and I did my thing. And then I think it was like about 2013, he kind of swung back and he was just like, hey, I just put a bass drop for sale on my website and sold 5,000 of them this week. And I was like, what? A bass drop? He's like, dude, yeah. He's like, I want to make like plugins and stuff. And I'm like, oh, that sounds kind of fun. So I'm like, I don't know anything about that, but I mean, I coded a little bit in like high school and college, and he's a little bit more of a coder. So he just finished his first version of gain reduction, and he was like, you want to do a guitar impulse pack? And I'm like, what's that? So I got on like the Andy Sneap board. I'm like, guitar impulses, and I put one together in 3 days and I turned it in. And it was interesting because he was talking to like 20 other plus producers at the time about doing products and kind of just leveraging off his brand that he had built. And I was literally, out of that stack, the only dude that turned something in. So think about that for a second, how embarrassing that is for those guys in hindsight.
Right.
Like,
yeah, that's crazy.
The opportunity they missed. I was literally the only guy that did the work, and I was the least famous and the least well known out of all of them.
Right.
So I just straight out freaking hustled them. And I put it out, and then we had already kind of started doing our Drumforge thing, and I was just making my own sample pack. And I was like, put it out and make like 10 grand, that would be sick. Because it was back in the day, I was charging like $300 a day at the studio. So I was like, whoa, and so he heard that and he's like, well, dude, we got to do this together. I'm like, sure. So we put Drumforge out then, maybe a month or two after we did that impulse pack, and the impulse pack just crushed. It did amazing. I couldn't believe it. Like, we were just like, what just happened?
Right.
And we did Drumforge, and then Steven Slate hit us up like launch day, and he was like, hey, we should talk about maybe doing something together with this and whatever. And we were like, cool, let's make this a real company then. So we immediately incorporated, and then, that's how that started. And then Joey and I, so we just started working together. And again, he had so much mixing, couldn't handle. He's like, dude, let's just like make a factory. So I learned how to clone him. And we were just kicking out like 50, 60 songs, like no kidding, a month. Like, it was crazy. So I had to bring on a full-time assistant, and we were just smashing mix after mix after mix. And we made a lot of money and did really good. And then, the products and stuff started doing good. And then we were always just nerding out about audio for hours.
Right, yeah.
Joey's like, hey, we should maybe make like a podcast or something. I think people are starting to do that. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, why not? I'm like, this is the most, like, we're so into this. We should, I feel like other people would be interested in our conversations because we just nerd out on such a high level. Yeah. And so we knew this other dude. Sorry, are you still there? I thought I blocked my phone. Okay.
We're good.
We knew to this other dude, Al, and Joey kind of introduced me to him, and he had experienced podcasting and Creative Live, and we started the podcast, which then turned into Nail the Mix, and I mean, God, the rest is history. Now that's all we do. I mean, I still do a couple of bands here and there, and I know Joey dabbles a little bit. Al doesn't, but it's been absolutely insane how fast that company has grown and like what it's achieved. And sometimes I don't believe that we own it or whatever, you know what I mean? Because for me, it's just like, I get on the phone with my friends and I talk about like, hey, let's talk about compression, let's make a course on compression. And then all of a sudden, we have live events where hundreds of people fly from all over the world to come see us and talk. And we hold, group meetings in different countries. It's like when we went to Sweden, there was like over 70 people that showed up to come see us. And some people flew from like Germany and, came from like Norway. And we were like, what the fuck? This is, can I swear?
That's got to be an amazing feeling to know that people are
the
resonating.
Enthusiasm. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's cool to hear that the people are resonating with what you're doing, and like you said, the enthusiasm is, off the charts.
It was kind of like a happy accident, but I will say this. I feel like Joey and Al and I are pretty sharp with marketing. I mean, we've invested in ourselves, and this is another point. I always hate when I see people that get like stingy about investing in education, or like now there's this big like fake guru push on YouTube. And it's like, oh, this business guy, he's a scam because he didn't pay his mortgage or something. And
Right,
I'm
right.
like, dude, I took that guy's course. I paid him like $2,000 and I learned a shitload. So
Right.
I'm sitting there and I'm thinking like, I don't know. Knowledge is knowledge, but when you apply that knowledge to something. So, I mean, Joey and Al and I have each invested well into six figures, well into some very far in marketing and masterminds. And we've learned, just like audio, we had to learn the skills. So it was a bit of a transition to be like a business owner, but it wasn't just like, oh, let's do this thing and it blew up. It was like, hey, let's do this thing. But then it was like, oh my God, hold on. And we had to kind of like rebuild our brains. And so we just went so hard on just education in that regard. And it was tough. I mean, I've been reading like 50 to 60 books a year ever since we started URM, and I've never done so much reading in my life. I feel like I'm in college, if that makes sense. I study every day because it's the only way I can keep up, because it's like, I don't know.
It moves fast. I mean, this industry, technology, everything is moving so fast. You have to keep up if you want to stay on the ahead or in the forefront of what you're doing.
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand that. You have to constantly be investing in your education. It's like I see people that complain about, like, I don't want to sign up for this. It's $20 a month. And I'm like, dude, you get to watch somebody who's one of the best people in the entire world do their thing and get the stems from one of the biggest bands in the world. You're complaining about $20. And I'm like, let me tell you about that course I took that cost $10,000, and I had to save up for that for months.
No,
was it worth it? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you invest the time in yourself and educate yourself and continue that educational process, because one thing I've learned about being in the studio and working with artists all the time is like, I better keep up with the trends and keep up with what's going on, or I'm going to get left behind really quick. And there's always some new slick technique or, new slick sound or something that somebody's incorporated in a pop record or a hip hop record or, a metal song. And you better know how they did that and figure it out, because a client's already going to know about it and they're going to come in requesting that little piece. And if you're not on top of it, then you're just going to be, they're going to choose the next studio.
Vegas, I can't agree more. I think if there's something I've been preaching for years, I'm so with you on that, because I'll tell you one thing that really helped me when I was producing actively. I mean, like I said, I'm still mixing, but I don't produce bands. I haven't produced a band since maybe 2015 or 16. I think Machine Head was the last band that I actually produced a song for. And I'll tell you, a lot of people in my market, and I mean, I'm from Milwaukee, so it's not necessarily like, it's not LA, let's be honest, it's not Nashville. It's not the studio hub of anywhere, but a lot of people there were just set in their ways. Like when hardcore and metalcore was having a surge, like the emo thing, no one wanted to learn it because they were like, oh, stupid kids with bullet belts and purple hair. Like, that's dumb. Like, they didn't understand it. And I didn't like it or care for it either, but I'm like, I better learn this because I got these bands calling me and they're like, hey, I want to sound like, this attack band. And I'm like, I've never heard anything like that before. Let me figure this out. And then the next week it's like you'd have a crunkcore band come in and it's like synths and like acoustic guitar and singing. And I'm like, what? And they're like, here, we want to sound like this Never Shout Never guy. And again, as a producer, you're like, oh my God, I got to learn this because the market changes so fast. And a lot of people, especially metalheads, get stuck in this elitist mindset. Like, oh, well, I only listen to gent, so I only want to work with gent bands. I'm like, hope you like your day job, because you're assuming that gent's going to be cool in 5 years. You're assuming that, production styles aren't going to change in 5 years. And if you love music, you're going to want to record any type of music. It doesn't matter. It's better than sitting in an office and being an accountant.
Yeah, and I did the accounting thing for a while, and that was no fun.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. I got my degree in accounting, and I did that for a number of years before I got into the music industry and started managing. Kind of led me to Dan, and that's how I got started engineering and producing. And Dan gave me a lot of opportunity there to learn, what I had already started learning, but never really had the opportunity, a studio to do that in. And
for sure,
to be around that environment, I never realized how much I learned from watching a couple of records being made. How valuable that experience was compared to some of the kids who go to Full Sail or Berkeley and come out of there and they're so ready, but they still have no clue on how things work, and how the process works, because they didn't really get the opportunity to take part in the process.
I
You
got
get
a
a lot of,
formula for this.
yeah. Let's
This
hear it.
is my friend taught me this. His company's worth 67 million. So anytime somebody has is worth that much money, I listen to their advice. He says,
Absolutely.
he said his dad taught him this on his deathbed. I was like, all right, man, that's pretty serious. So he says 4 pillars, right, for success. He's like, knowledge. And this is the shit I literally teach to my kids. Like, I was in the car today with my 5-year-old teaching him this, like, no exaggeration. And first thing is knowledge. Like, you have to learn the stuff, right? You have to learn the skill. You have to understand it, master it, and then you gain experience after the knowledge. Okay, and this is the kind of thing people are like, oh, that's obvious. You know what I mean? But it's not, because I see so many people violate this. So knowledge first, then experience, because there's so many things they don't teach you in school. Then network, okay? Because you don't have anything to go to a networking event and offer people unless you've got experience, unless you have knowledge, unless you're, once you are somebody and you've done something, it's easy to go and network because you're like, I'm so-and-so. They're like, hey, walk on in. Versus I remember going to NAMM like 6 years ago when we were just starting all this stuff. I'd walk up to like the CEO of any company, be like, oh, we got this, but like, get lost. Now they're like, oh, let me clear my schedule. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just so that's when you network. And then after that, you're able to build wealth. And I think maybe this is something you can resonate with. I mean, just to give an example of how, like, your comparison to audio school, there's so many things that aren't being taught. Like, for example, like people producer interaction skills. And this is something we work hard at trying to bridge at URM, for example. It's like, this is the real world stuff nobody talks about. People want to talk about compressors, EQs, what freaking parallel compression bus, was routed to what. You know what I mean? They care about that shit. That shit doesn't matter. Okay. It does, but it doesn't. What matters is, like, can you manage the relationships and get the best performance out of the artist, manage the egos, the battles, to bring people to peak performance? And that is a skill that no one is teaching. Again, this is something we work hard at URM, but I don't know anybody else who's sitting around lecturing on, like, how to inspire a band and deal with different types of personalities that are clashing and, things like that. So
that's a interesting point, because that's something I wish that I would have had when I was learning, when I was managing artists. That was,
but you learned it with Dan, sitting there watching sessions, right?
Yeah, I learned it with Dan. Absolutely. Well, when I was managing artists, you have to, babysit. You have to figure out a way to manage all those personalities, all those egos, all those different opinions, and keep that focus on that same goal, everybody on that same vision and that same goal. And I understand there's different personalities to manage, but when you get a little bit different, and you're right, you want to get the best out of your artists, you want to get the best out of your clients. So if they're giving their best, you're going to be able to do better with what you get.
I'll tell you a great story about this. I remember I had a local band, and I had got them picked up, and I did all the dev work on them. I got them picked up to Sony, and Motown, Universal Motown, back when that was a thing before it folded.
Right.
So this band, they got a mega budget. We had a song they thought was a hit, all that stuff. A&R guy flew out, blah, 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 blah. So they're like, all right, let's go around and write. So they went to work with this producer. I'm not going to say his name, but he's pretty well known. And he's, very successful guy. And I remember going down to this band. I'm like, I just want to fly in the wall because I'm so excited to learn something. And I sat down, and this guy, the band walks in the studio. They're like, a little starstruck, a little excited. This fucking guy takes his hands behind his head. Now, if you study body language, that's like, hey, I'm a dick, I know everything kind of thing. Puts his feet on the fucking, on the console, and he goes, hey guys, I took some liberties with your song. Check it out. Like, so arrogant. Hits the button, and I'm watching the band because I observed this stuff, and I'm kind of like, all right, I'm looking at my chops,
right?
And I'm like, oh, this isn't gonna go good, but I'm not gonna say anything because I'm like nobody compared to this guy, and I'm watching the band, and they sit there, and all of a sudden, he kind of comes in like that, and they cross their arms. I'm like, all right, strike one. Then the heads start going down when they sit play, and then. He didn't even try to read the artist and figure out if they were open to his opinion or not. Right. He just walked in. He's like, look, dude, I made your song awesome. Hits play. And the band was like, I walked out with the singer, all right, like 10 minutes later. And the singer is like, how do I explain it? He's one of the most strong-headed people I've ever met in my life. Like if you don't take the time to respect him and listen to him, he's not going to work with you. So I walked out and he just looks at me and goes, "Fuck this guy. I'm never working with this guy again." And I just lost it. I'm like, you lost yet? The arms crossed behind the head and let me show you what I did to your song. He's like, yeah. So that just goes to show you that despite this guy, I mean, creatively, he was genius. Like just watching him work, I'm like, God, I wish I was that creative as a producer. He was incredible to watch, but he fucking sucked at psychology and didn't understand or take the time to really get into the artist's head and click with them or connect with them. And see, that's something I knew how to do. And he lost the thing. He literally lost like $100,000 budget on that. And, they ended up going to Howard Benson. A genius at that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to have some sort of humility in this business. I mean, if you're successful, humility goes a long way. And, I encountered this last week, I had an artist in here who was coming from another studio, and he brought his investor in. He wants to do a record and, all this blah, blah, blah stuff. And I sat down and I looked at him and I'm like, tell me what it is that you're trying to do. What's the sound that you're going after? What are you looking to do? And he looked at me and he goes, you're the first person in any studio that I've ever been in ask me that question.
Wow.
And I'm like, I'm not like every studio around, and I don't know if this is a common thread among studios around the nation, but here in Cleveland, it seems like it's just a cash cow thing. They just want to get your money. You come in, you pay your rate, and you leave with your product, and there's no interaction with the artist. There's no trying to find out what it is they want. There's no love.
National producers, people who play in the highest league, from people who never leave the local league. And that's, if there's one thing, that's it.
Okay.
I mean, that's where I made it. Like, for me, it was all about developing the artist and building them and teaching them and coaching them and mentoring them and then teaching them how to get signed. Because in every market, sorry, go ahead.
So to me, that's exactly what my responsibility is as an engineer. Is not only just to give them a great sounding recording and experience in the studio, but I also try to educate them while they're here. If they have any questions about the industry, they see that I've got some knowledge. They see that I've been around the block a little bit, and so they ask questions. I'm open to that. I love that when they ask questions. I want to help an artist, and to the point, where they feel like they're making some progress, they're gaining some traction, and I think you're right. I think that's what separates a lot of studios from other studios. I mean, here in Cleveland, it seems like hip hop is something that a lot of studios don't want to deal with. And I understand the negativity that comes with it, but it comes with metal, it comes with rock, it comes with pop punk, it comes with every genre.
Man, I'm moving to Cleveland. I'm going to come clean up. All I see is opportunity. I mean, the businessman.
But you're right. I mean, some of the biggest studios here treat it horribly, or they don't do it anymore. And I'm stealing people from the Lava Room. I'm stealing people from, all the studios out in the Akron area. People were coming from Cleveland to come out to the studio here. And I don't think it's because my sound is that much better than anybody else's. I think that I've got a good sound, but it's the way that I treat the artists that come here. Everybody is like family when they walk through my studio. I want them to get that sense of, I want them to come back. Right. And I want to give them a reason to come back. And I think that's where a lot of studio startups miss the mark.
I got a good story about this. So I'm going to take this building I'm in. So I've got my office here. On the other side of me is a studio. We'll call him, Eric's like one of the local reigning champs around here. So we have this intern, Ryan, who's literally sitting above my head right now in his studio right now. And how long do you think Ryan's been in the game? Years? 3 years? Oh, he can't hear me. So Ryan, I want to say maybe he interned for like 2 or 3 years. And, he's been off on his own for maybe a year and a half. And I mean, this kid, I've literally watched. Now, we are helping him and giving him some good guidance on what to do. But talk about a guy who came in and wanted to record rock bands and like a very specific niche. He is like the hip hop guy in the city of Milwaukee right now. He has, I shit you not, at least 60 to 70 rappers that come to him. They come in 1 or 2 hours at a time. Right. But I mean, his calendar is booked every day, all day, whenever he wants to work. And he is smashing it. You know, these guys come in to work an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. They bring 5 friends. Boom, the 5 friends come back. They rebook because he just sits down. He listens. He's easy to work with. He's like reasonably priced, and no one else wants to do this stuff. And they're all like, man, we've gone to all these other studios, and they all just, the quality's not as good. The price is too high, and they don't care. He's like, you actually take the time to make it worthwhile. So it just goes to show that, again, you know, when I came into my market, I completely disrupted it and took it over. And the formula was simple. I looked at what everybody else was doing, and I just thought that, which is just record the band, get paid, put out something that sounds like dog shit, and don't try to follow any trends because you don't like that or understand that kid music. I looked at it, I'm like, okay, somewhere in this market is a star or a handful of people that have a gift that could be a star. How do I find that person? How do I develop that person? And how do I help that person achieve their goals? And if I can do that, other than just hitting the damn button, and if I treat everybody like that, eventually through brute force, one of them is going to achieve something and maybe they'll return the favor, which is what happens. And I got a #1 song I mixed this way. Remember that hard-headed kid I was telling you about? So he went off to Howard Benson's camp many years later and ended up writing a song for All That Remains that went #1 and some stuff like that. And, you know, he did really good, but he was working with this as a backup singer and a writer, excuse me, for this guy in Japan who's very famous called Miyavi. If you've seen the movie King Kong, Skull Island, he was like Japanese fighter pilot. And then there was Unbroken with Angelina Jolie, directed in 2014. It was like a Pacific prisoner of war kind of movie. He was like the generals. He's a movie star, and he's you know, he's like a guitar samurai kind of dude. So, you know, Sean, this kid, he was working over there, and they needed, you know, Howard's #2 guy, like his junior producer Lenny needed a mixing guy. So he's like, I was mixing some stuff for Sean, and he's like, dude, this stuff sounds good, but you know, I'm not paying LA prices for it. So he sent me some stuff, and I did my job, and I landed that record and I got to mix it, and we had a song that went #1. So they flew me out to Japan and all that stuff. And had I not taken the time to take that 16-year-old kid, is what I'm saying, and develop him, which is the same kid that I met Joey with. And then he got signed after that. And then he went to, work with studios and write, and then the label folded. Then he became a writer at and, you know, had I not taken the time and worked with this kid over a 10-year period, well, it was him who came back and hooked me up with the opportunity, like I said, that got me a #1 song that I got to mix. And it just goes to show that if you believe in people and you develop people and you actually give a shit and you care about your artists, every once in a while, karmatically, that does, if that's a word, it comes back and it swings back, and you know, the universe takes and it gives. So
when I first started the studio, I'd never envisioned that it would be anything more than myself. I don't know when you started your situation. I mean, you kind of gave a little bit of a timeline of how you came about, but I never envisioned that I would have anybody working with me. I never envisioned that I'd have interns or that we'd be growing into the way that we're growing. But I think part of it was like, at some point I realized I can't do this by myself. I need a team. If I really want to do what I want to do and achieve the visions and goals that I have in my head. It's like, I can't do it all by myself. So I have to find a team and help develop that team, give them some of the knowledge that I have, and learn from them, from what knowledge they bring to the table. So I'm constantly looking for people to bring into the studio that bring value, but also want to invest their time in the studio as well and help the brand. And I think that helps also with the studio aspect and growing the studio. Do you have any advice for any studio owners or basement studio owners, or those who are been doing it a couple of years, who are trying to get over the hump or want to grow? You know,
Sure.
You've given a lot of great advice so far that, I mean, it's awesome advice. One thing I've noticed, that you're very entrepreneurial. You wear more than one hat. And
too many usually.
Sometimes, but
it has its pros and its cons.
It does have its pros and its cons. I mean, it serves a satisfying nature that you need inside of you because you have all these things that you need to get out. But yeah, anything that you could give us, any advice, I'd appreciate.
Sure. I think the first thing that's important is what level. You have to ask yourself a question. I'm a big fan of like self-reflective questioning. And the first question I would ask anybody or recommend that you ask yourself would be, what level do I want to play at? Okay. Right. Because every level you play at requires, as a lot of people would put it, additional levels of bullshit.
Right.
Right. So how much bullshit, but the pay goes up, right? So how much bullshit do you want to deal with for how much money? Now, if you're a maniac like me who, likes to take big risks, afraid to, go out swinging and, you know what I mean, and get beat in a fight, like I'm the kind of guy, when I started this, I'm like, I want to be the best of the world. Now, I don't care if I have the talent to do it. I don't care. But I'm going to set my goal there because, again, if I aim for the star, if I still get to the damn moon, at least I got out of the atmosphere.
Right.
So my mentality always was like, all right, who's the best? How do I beat that person? Right. And, okay, cool. Now I've conquered this and I've gotten, I got a #1 song. But now where do I go? Do I want to do more of those? No, now it's about spreading impact for me. So, I can't keep setting the goal higher and higher and higher and higher. And so, but that's a certain type of personality. I have a buddy in town. I recorded my first record with him in 1997 before I even recorded anything. And, he's the kind of guy that just wants to record bands locally. He loves what he does. He's a smart, talented guy, and he's happy with his level. He's not out trying to get national stuff and work on that level. So you really got to identify and define what it is you actually want. I met a billionaire once at a marketing conference, and I was talking to him for a very long time because my wife is Russian, and he had done some business in Russia, and we had a lot to connect on. And he asked me over a drink or after a few drinks, he was like, "So what is it you want?" And he laid out the options. It's just like, where are you going? Like, what do you want? And then it was interesting because I thought I knew the answer to that. And then I came back to him like 2 days later. I'm like, actually, blah, 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 blah. And then he kind of took me down the rabbit hole further. But it was a powerful question because no one ever sat me down and was like, what do you want? What are you trying to do? Where are you? Like, what is your vision? And I'm like, whoa, hold on. So it's the same thing. Do you want to record? Do you want to be the guy in your market? Do you want to work in a regional sense? Do you want to just do stuff in a small local niche? Like, do you want to record bands on tape that only do, indie punk and nothing else and do it as a side hustle? Do you want to have a day job, but maybe pick up some extra mixing and do some mastering? Do you want to record bands on the weekends? Do you want to, be the best metal mixer in the entire world or the best EDM songwriter? You got to figure out what you want and what you want to do. Once you know what you want, because like I said, every step you go up the ladder intensifies the complexity of the thing. So, for example, when I was recording local bands, they show up, they pay, you get paid, it's less money, but they're going to pay you if you have good deposit rules and you're good. When you're working with labels, all of a sudden, maybe you're doing a record and they get a new A&R guy, and the A&R guy hates the band and kills the record, and then you get stiffed like $20,000 for 9 months. That's the kind of shit that goes on. So are you willing to take that risk where you go in and you work your ass off for a month and a half, and then all of a sudden you don't get paid, or the label folds, or somebody sues somebody, or, you have a much higher level of risk and exposure playing on a higher level, and therefore stress. So that's the first thing. Once you figure out what you want, I think then it's more about breaking it down into actionable steps. So like, let's just use the example. So let's just say you're a regional producer, because I remember being at this space, but you want to work on the big shape. All right. So how do you get to the big level? Well, you obviously have to get a client or a manager to introduce you to get you test mixes and stuff like that. Right. How do you do it? The best way to do that? Well, you've got to break somebody, or you've got to find some talent and develop it to the point where it attracts some attention, because a lot of the stuff I got was I would work with a band, they would get signed, I'd work with them more, they would bring on some hotshot manager, he would come to check it out, boom, come into the studio and be like, wow, you're a breath of fresh air, and then they would pick me up, and then I would start getting me test mixes, and then you got to go beat some incumbents, which is really, really hard to do because, when you go in a test mix against somebody that you've idolized for like, let's say 10 years, you're like, there's no fucking way I can win this, you know?
Yeah, right.
But you still got to show up and you got to go head to head and you got to spar, you know? And honestly, at the end of the day, it's whatever the band connects with the best. And sometimes you beat the big Titan and sometimes you get your ass kicked. So, you know, you have to dethrone somebody on a mix, and then you got to do it again, and you got to do it again. And then what happens is you have to essentially you become the guy or the gal, you know, and then you're in the seat, and you know you got to defend the title. So it's kind of like MMA, you know.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely a very competitive industry. I mean, you wouldn't unless you're in it. That's how competitive.
Level.
Right.
So
right.
I think it's easy to go in locally and mop up for most people because, again, you just have to care and show up. And just like interning, it's easy to be a great intern in a studio. All you have to do is show up on time and bring value. And no one understands that. I've watched intern after intern fail because they come in with a sense of entitlement.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had a couple of those, and I'm learning the intern, that game right now. I've got a couple of interns, but they bring value to me. And in turn,
never let them go.
They bring some value, and in turn I give them, value back by, teaching them the ropes, time in the chair, watching, being a fly on the wall, getting to watch how I interact with the client and things like that. Well, that's some really cool advice. I know where I was kind of leading before that question was, I was already thinking of my next question. And like I said, I know you wear a lot of hats, and in order to be able to do that, you have to be pretty organized.
You do.
And one thing I know about this industry, in order to really kind of make your mark and kind of be successful at doing what you're doing, is you better be organized at what you're doing. You better have a good system in place of how you do things. I've watched a couple of your speed mixing videos, your conferences. I watched the MixCon one. I thought there was some great information, and I was pretty surprised at how much I kind of already do, that we learn and we realize as we go through. It's like, okay, man, I need to make sure that I stay creative in the creative mode when I'm, mixing a song. And I noticed that you're big on templates. You're big on presetting things up. I'm very big on templates and doing the same thing. I like your glue bus or bus glue.
Bus glue, yes.
Bus glue. I love how you set that up so that you have it already preset up for the different types of instruments, and it just makes the workflow so much easier. And workflow is so important to us that organization really makes that workflow happen. And if you're not organized, you're just never going to create a good workflow that's going to work for you and keep you in that creative space, as opposed to that technical space that you talk about. You're right. There is a technical side of it. We've got to take time out to set that up. And I think that's what you've taken time out to do, is organize your process so that you've gotten the technical side pretty much taken care of, pre-set up, that allows you to focus more on the creative side. Can you go into a little bit about that?
I have a lot I can say on this. First thing, I'm going to blow your mind and say I'm absolutely the opposite of everything you just described. Excuse me. This goes back to building a team, but I'm not a very organized person. But I know what I'm good at, and I have people on my team who are superstars, like Joey, at organizing.
Right.
My assistant is insanely organized, so he really helps me with that. Because I mean, if I can't, I'm a go-getter. Right. If I can't figure it out in 2 seconds, like I don't want to mess around with all this technical stuff. I want to go and attack something. So for me, if I have to install a piece of software and I can't do it in one click, like I'm not interested in doing it. So, So I
Gotcha.
actually struggle with organization, but again, I work with people who bring out that side of me because it's not natural to me, and have forced me to get insanely organized. Because when you mix, for example, like Joey and I were doing, 50 or 60 songs a month, it's
Right.
like, I had to sit down, and my assistant Joey and I, like, we built a mixing team. We're like, okay, how can we start all the way at the email communication level with the client to pre-frame them so we have less mix notes and better expectations to be able to read their mind? Can we have a more efficient process of file transfer and mix
Right.
revisions and going back and forth? And you know what I mean? It's so one thing that was powerful, and again, this goes back to continuing education, but I was just taking a course from a guy who develops, gajillion-dollar companies. He's a business consultant. And one of the things he was talking about as a CEO, like, your job is and just think about process and, like, what are you doing and how can you do it better and more efficiently? So if you make widgets, how can I make that widget better? How am I selling it? How can I sell it more efficiently? How can the HR work better? It's just to sit around and think about your company all day and be like, so to me, it's like, apply that to the studio.
Right.
Sit down and be like, okay, so when the artist comes in, if I'm going to do pre-production, am I going to have that microphone on that stand, or do I have to turn it down? Or, I can leave that microphone up when I record because I know it's going to be on cymbal. So I might as well buy another 2 sets of stand and leave that thing plugged in on channel 6 and always have that set up for overheads, because I know 99.99999% of the time I'm never going to have to rewire that thing. Right. So it's just looking for opportunities in your process to improve what you're doing, all the way, like I said, from systems of communication with your clients and how you communicate with them. Because again, it's like if I get on the phone with a client, obviously I talk a lot. So I could sit and BS for 45 minutes, but that's 45 minutes that could be making money. So it's like, how do you limit those interactions to be as productive as possible? Now, because again, if you want to scale anything, and I own multiple businesses. I even own stuff out of audio that people don't even know that I own. That does very, very well, and in some cases even surpasses what I've done in audio. But in order to do that, just like in the studio, you've got to build something, right? This goes back to those pillars I was talking about. You got to get the knowledge, you got to get the experience, the network, then you form the team, you scale it, you work at the process, you build that up, and then you make it self-sufficient, and then you go grab another one and repeat the process, and you go grab another one and you repeat the process. And after a while, you are like a queen bee with a hive and a bunch of bees running around doing a bunch of things, if that makes sense. So again, applying that to a producer, when I go to LA and I walk into a studio like Howard's, for example,
Cool. Has COVID hit you?
No,
How is it? I mean,
no, it hasn't affected me at all.
cool.
And I mean, maybe this is controversial. I mean, obviously, when that hit, we were all shitting ourselves, and all businesses and every partner I have is like, oh my God, what do we do?
Right.
But at the end of the day, nothing. Okay, I just bought a new house, and one of the things that pisses me off is like I can't tell you how many times like, oh, our appliances are on back order because of COVID. Oh, we
Right.
can't
Yeah.
come out because COVID. Everything's delayed because of COVID. I'm like, this you guys just fucking suck at business. I'm like,
Yeah.
when COVID hit, I was on the phone the next day with my partners, and we were like, how can we beat this and grow our business in an economy where everybody's going to be like penny pinching and
Mm-hmm.
canceling all their shit and afraid they're going to lose their jobs? How can we make it so fucking painful for somebody to unsubscribe or not buy our software? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
use our product. How can we add that much value to their life? So we went to work. We changed stuff. We innovated in certain ways that allow us to do things. So I gotta say, I'm fortunate. I have so many friends that own restaurants and things like that. I know a lot of business people that got
Right.
their butts kicked and they're really struggling, and it's
Yeah.
sad,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially because it's not their fault, you know, because it's like
Right.
all of a sudden the governor comes in and just says, oh yeah, we're gonna do this, but we're gonna shut down your business. It's like no one's talking about the hundreds of millions, billions of dollars that have been lost. How many lives have been destroyed? Yeah, I mean, okay, people have died from COVID. It's terrible, obviously, but
Right.
no one's talking about the hidden cost, and that's all the people that have their fucking lives destroyed by.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've watched people just who've been in business for 25 years. You know, he's like, man, I can't feed my kids. Like the state unemployment is 6 months behind. He's like, I'm not getting any help from any government. Like, what am I supposed to do? I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I'd be like AK-47 marching on the Capitol, locked and loaded, you know. But that's me. Or I'd be in court suing, you know. So,
Right.
but we decided, we're like, look, we can't control that, but we can control is what we do and the value we bring. Let's go over deliver in every possible way to our customer, and more so than we were already doing, and let's work really hard to be more part of our, you know, these people's lives. So everything I had grew, but I think you know, we got a little lucky in the industry, but it definitely, to me, it's like we really had to step up to the plate. And again, I feel
Right.
like we were already operating on 100%, but I felt like it was necessary to kick it to 120 and really, really strategize about, okay, like what is it going to take to really make this something that people put that much value on? Because, you know, if you got to cancel your Netflix sub or your this or that for Nail the Mix, it's like, I want to make sure that we fight to the death to get Nail the Mix, like up on that list where you're like, I'm
Right.
not canceling this. I'd rather eat ramen noodles for the next month. I'm not canceling this. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
Right. Right.
so that's what we did. So COVID did not, like, it affected us in a very positive way. Now, that being said, I
Good.
had COVID. It sucked. My wife had it. It
Right.
really hurt her. You know, it sucks because we can't travel. There's a lot of things that are bad from COVID, but
Right. Right.
business has been good.
Business
And
wise. Right.
yeah, very thankful for that, because again, we did work our asses off. So
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, it's some luck and a lot of execution.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thankful that we withstood the initial hit, and we didn't shut down. We just figure out ways to work through it and safely work through it. And
I'm happy to hear that. That's wonderful.
we got actually more clients through through it because a lot of studios were shut down.
See, there you
But
go. In every situation, good or bad, there's no good or bad. There's only opportunities.
opportunities.
And it's an issue of what do you do with those opportunities?
Yeah.
So, I mean, so many people get caught up in like what politics or whatever happened, and there's so many things in the world, and you can't control everything, but you
No.
can control what you do. You can control how you view it, and you can control what your output is. So,
Absolutely.
you know, you're a survivor. That's why you're still here, and everybody else shut down out of fear, and you kept going.
Right. Well, Joel, it's been awesome catching up with you. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be on my show. I will definitely shoot you a link whenever I'm done with it, the editing, and to shoot it over your way just so you see it before I put it out there, get your approval. But I really appreciate you being on the show and sharing all your knowledge and advice and you know, experience with us, and hope to have you back again.
Anytime.
And
I appreciate it, and it's always my pleasure. I always love doing this kind of stuff.
yeah, I love talking tech and, you know, music and all that kind of stuff. I love nerding out like that. So I appreciate it again. Let's stay in contact a little bit more than we have over the past 8 years.
course.
But at least we've been in contact, and that's cool that we've stayed in contact. I think it's always important that when you run across people in this industry who you connect well with, to definitely stay connected with those people, because you never know what opportunities come your way.
Absolutely never know. I remember the story I told about that kid in the band. Who would have thought that band would have been the gateway to a #1 song and me meeting Joey and all this stuff?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like, what would you never know? You never know. So,
but I appreciate it, man. Have a great, wonderful week. Much success to you, and have a great.
Likewise, Vegas. It's been a pleasure, man. Take care and keep working hard, man.
All right, man. Appreciate it.
Yep.
I'll talk to you
Cheers.
soon. Bye. Hey guys, this is Mike Villegas from the Area 67 Recording Studio. I just want to say thank you for tuning into the Area 67 Music Podcast Show. Check the links down below to find us on your social media networks. Be sure to tune in, hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell button so you get notifications whenever we're doing a show. Thanks for tuning in, and be sure to check out some of our other videos up above. Peace.